This is the kind of story that feels like an urban legend. The kind of tale so horrifying you'd swear it was made up just to scare people. But it isn't. In the summer of 1965, Houston police performed a welfare check on an elderly couple who hadn't been heard from for days, but what they found was a gruesome nightmare. This is the story of one of the most disturbing crime scenes in Texas history and a mystery that's never been solved. Join us as we discuss the Icebox Murders. Hey guys, and welcome to the Moms and Mysteries podcast, a true crime podcast featuring myself, Mandy, and my dear friend, Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Mandy. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Summer's kicked off.
It's kicked off all right.
That's it. Mm-hmm.
It has. Yeah, I feel like I've gotten now, we're still kind of early in summer, but I've really settled nicely into my summer routine, which is a lot different and more laid back than my school year routine.
Yeah.
So now I've kind of gotten spoiled on getting really sleepy in the middle of the day and just being like, well, I can just relax for a little while. There's still plenty of time. I don't have anything really to do. I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to pick up any kids. So yes, we are sitting down to record. It's 1:30 in the afternoon and I have a cup of coffee because I'm already in my summertime afternoon nap mode. So I'm all over the place right now. I know I have to work. It's the middle of the week, but at the same time, it's also the middle of the summer. So
I know. We're going to swim a little bit after this, as long as it doesn't rain. But that's a nice perk in the summer of being able to just get in the water and get out and work, I guess, or clean. I should do that, or doing laundry.
Did you say that's the great thing about the summer is you're able to get out and clean and work?
No. Get it in the water.
Oh.
Get in the water, freshen up in the water. I'm don't even shower. Hop in the water, get out and do your chores. It makes a lot of sense. It is motivating for kids, though.
It is.
Do your chores and you can go swimming. That's helpful. Other than that, no. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm very, very excited about this episode. I was not familiar with this story. I actually got the Icebox Murders confused with a different, a serial killer thing. So this was all brand new information to me. Super fascinating and wow.
Yeah, this is definitely a very crazy story. It sounds like it would be something from a movie or just from a scary story and not a real life thing. It also kind of gave me a little bit of Dexter season 1 vibes with the ice truck
that's
killer.
What I'm coming up with.
Maybe that is kind of where your subconscious connected that and that's what you were thinking, something different. But that's kind of what I was thinking at first. That was the first thing I thought of was Dexter. That whole season was about the ice truck killer. And it was actually a very similar premise to that season as what happened in this real life story. So let's just get into it. So Fred and Edwina Rogers weren't the type of people that you would expect to meet some kind of tragic or gruesome end. Fred, who was born way back in 1884, was 81 years old when this story unfolded. He was a retired real estate salesman, but depending on who you asked, that really wasn't the full story. Some say Fred dabbled in gambling and fraud, and a few even claim that he was a bookie by trade. His wife, Edwina, or Ebby as she was known to friends, was born in 1892. She was 79 at the time of the story and worked as a Tupperware saleswoman, which brought in a little extra income. It's actually funny to me that, I feel like Tupperware sales was the first MLM that ever existed.
Absolutely.
Before it was considered multi-level marketing. But don't you remember those door-to-door
parties?
Tupperware? Or I remember we used to get people, I don't know why this one stands out, but I remember one time we had a door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman come to our house. But I remember my mom saying she would never buy something for one of the people who came to your door, trying to sell you Tupperware or a vacuum or anything else. But it is crazy to think about how far back that actually goes.
Oh, yeah. Well, my parents, I very much remember this. The nicest vacuum cleaner we ever had was because my dad did paint and body work on the side. And so someone didn't have enough money to pay him. And they were like, we just got this really nice vacuum cleaner from a door-to-door salesman. And so we ended up with it. And I remember that just being the thing in our house. And I'll just never forget the bartering that went along with that. But that was a big thing in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. So Fred and Edwina had 2 children, though their first child, a daughter named Betty Charlotte, tragically died at the age of 10 in an accident that is still shrouded in mystery, and there is not a lot of information about it. But it was the couple's second child, Charles, who would prove to be the one who left a lasting mark on the family's legacy. Charles was born in 1921 in Houston, and by most accounts, he was a very gifted man. He enrolled at Texas A&M in the early 1940s. Eventually, Charles transferred to the University of Houston, where he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in nuclear physics. During World War II, Charles served as a Navy pilot, which is a very prestigious role in the Navy. After the war, he got a job with Shell Oil as a seismologist, which is a scientist that studies earthquakes and the Earth's internal structure. After years with this company, Charles just abruptly quit with no explanation in 1957. By the time of our story, Charles was 43 years old and was living in an upstairs bedroom at his parents' home. His lifestyle was always more reclusive, but things had reached an extreme level. So extreme that neighbors who'd been living next to the Rogers for 7 years said they didn't even know that Charles, a full-grown 43-year-old man, existed and was living in this home. Yeah, Charles rarely interacted with anyone, and he would enter and exit the house through the garage to avoid all unnecessary contact. Charles was a very eccentric man with an impressive intellect about him. He reportedly spoke 7 different languages. He was also a ham radio enthusiast, and even though operating a ham radio does require skill and even licensing, it's not clear whether Charles ever officially obtained a license. Even to his own extended family, Charles was largely a mystery. His cousin, Martin Marvin, described him as a small man. He was about 5'7" and 130 pounds. And Martin said he had no idea what Charles did with his days or whether or not he even had a job. What Martin did know is that Charles kept to himself. Charles cooked his own meals on a hot plate in his bedroom, and he kept a very, very strange and secretive existence within the walls of his parents' home.
As unsettling as Charles's behaviors had become, no one could have imagined just how far things were about to spiral. In the late spring or early summer of 1965, Charles was as elusive as ever. His cousin Martin had visited a couple of weeks prior, but Charles was never home when Martin would come by. Martin kept in touch with his aunt Edwina regularly over the phone. According to his aunt, Charles was like a shadow in the house. He would leave early in the morning, long before his parents ever woke up, and he wouldn't return until after they were in bed for the night. Even when they were all home at the same time, Charles hardly ever spoke to his parents. I will say this sounds kind of like a teenager, but this is way more extreme and a full-grown man. So if he needed to communicate with them, he would just slide notes under their bedroom doors. Edwina talked to Martin about these things, and it was clear that the eerie setup was really wearing her down. On June 23rd, Martin called to check up on his aunt and uncle, but he wasn't able to get through to them. So he started to get worried, and he ended up driving to their home on Driscoll Street. When he got there, he immediately noticed that the newspapers and mail were piling up outside. This would end up being the first of many unsettling signs of trouble. Martin knocked on the door, but no one answered. He tried the handle, but he wasn't able to get in that way either. By this time, Martin was alarmed enough to call the Houston Police Department to request a welfare check on his aunt and uncle. Officer Bullock and Officer Barta were dispatched to the house. They noted that the door was locked, but something else captured their attention. There was a bizarre barricade of flower pots that had been stacked just inside the entryway, as if someone was trying to keep others out, or keep something in. The officers sensed that something was suspicious and seemed wrong, so they forced the door open to investigate further.
At first, the house appeared surprisingly normal. There was no overturned furniture and no sign of a struggle inside, but Captain Bullock later said something about the place just felt off. As they made their way around the house, Officer Bullock randomly felt the urge to check in the refrigerator. He later said, "I don't know why I looked in the refrigerator. For some reason, I just opened it." When he first opened it, it looked like there were stacks of butchered hog meat or something packed inside the fridge, and Bullock started to close the door. But then at the last moment, he spotted something that would make even the most seasoned detective recoil. He saw 2 severed human heads carefully placed in brown paper bags in the vegetable bin of the refrigerator. The officers quickly realized what they had just found. It was the dismembered remains of Fred and Edwina Rogers. The next day, an article in the Amarillo Globe-Times described the gruesome scene. It read, "On all the shelves and in the freezer compartment were the dismembered bodies, cut in, washed off pieces smaller than individual joints." Whoever was responsible for this had not acted on impulse. The bodies were meticulously cleaned, dissected, and arranged inside the fridge and freezer neatly. Investigators later discovered that Fred's eyes had been gouged out. Edwina's face was bruised, and both victims had suffered fatal head wounds, likely inflicted with a claw hammer. The precision involved in the dismemberment itself led authorities to believe the killer had some degree of anatomical knowledge. They didn't believe this was the work of someone in a panic and in the aftermath of a hasty, rage-filled attack. This was calculated and clinical. The physical evidence was chilling, and the one question on everyone's mind now was, where was Charles Rogers? And we're going to get into that after a quick break to hear a word from this week's sponsors.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. One thing we've learned after telling so many true crime stories is that money can really complicate everything. Whether it's a source of stress or just something that people struggle to manage, money is the center of so many life decisions, good and bad. And that's why teaching kids how to handle money responsibly is so important.
Greenlight is a debit card and money app for families that helps parents raise financially smart kids and gives them a safe space to learn as they go. Parents can send money, set spending controls, get notifications, and even assign chores, so kids are actually earning their allowance, not just asking for it.
Kids and teens can learn real-world skills like how to save, how to give, and how to build confidence with money. Honestly, if I had Greenlight when I was growing up, I think I would have had a lot more peace of mind when it came to finances, instead of thinking it was all just some big mystery.
Give your kids the kind of financial education most of us didn't get. Join millions of parents and kids already using Greenlight, the #1 family finance and safety app. Start your risk-free Greenlight trial today at greenlight.com/moms. That's greenlight.com/moms to get started. Greenlight.com/moms.
Okay, can we talk about how most kids' vitamins are basically candy? Like, why does every single one need to be a sugar-packed gummy? When I started looking into what was actually in those little things, I was shocked. There were 2 teaspoons of sugar in some brands. No, thank you.
Same. The hidden sugar in everything is driving me insane. That's why I was so excited when I found Hiya. Hiya makes a super-powered chewable vitamin that is free of sugar and made without any gummy additives. Just yummy vitamins with the good stuff kids actually need. And these vitamins are perfect for those picky eaters who turn their noses up at everything. My kids love them, and they had a blast decorating their Hiya bottles with the stickers that come in their first order. It's now their own personal vitamin that they are excited to take, which makes my life so much easier.
Hiya is made with a blend of 12 organic fruits and veggies plus 15 essential vitamins and minerals like vitamin D, B12, C, zinc, folate, and more. It helps fill in the common gaps in kids' diets and supports things like immune health, energy, brain function, mood, concentration, teeth, bones, literally everything. It's also non-GMO, vegan, allergy-free, dairy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and every batch is third-party tested so you know exactly what you're getting.
And if you're tired of battling your kids to eat their greens, Hiya's got you covered with their Kids Daily Greens and Superfoods. It's a chocolate-flavored greens powder designed just for kids with over 55 whole food ingredients. Just scoop, shake, and sip with milk or a non-dairy beverage. It's greens your kid will actually drink.
We've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hiyahealth.com/moms. This deal is not available on their regular website. Go to hiyahealth.com/moms and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. And now back to the episode. Before the break, we started unraveling the mystery of the Icebox Murders that took place back in Houston in June of 1965. Police discovered the dismembered bodies of Fred and Edwina Rogers stuffed inside their own refrigerator, and their son Charles, who lived in the home at the time, was nowhere to be found. As word spread about the horrific scene inside the Rogers home, the investigation kicked into high gear. Police quickly determined that the murders likely took place the Saturday before Father's Day, just a few days before the bodies were discovered. When the medical examiner began his work, the full extent of the brutality became clear. Edwina was badly beaten before she was shot execution style, while Fred suffered an even more gruesome fate. He was bludgeoned with a claw hammer, his eyes were removed, and he had been emasculated. It was later learned that Fred's organs were flushed down the home's sewer system. Both of the bodies were drained of blood, and investigators determined that the dismemberment took place in the upstairs bathroom. The autopsy showed that both victims died from severe head wounds. The medical examiner noted that the killer seemed to have a disturbingly precise understanding of human anatomy. It was clear that the dismemberment was not sloppy or rushed, but instead had been done meticulously and with great care. Authorities never found the instruments used to carry out the dismemberment, but they did recover a keyhole saw, a knife, and scissors from inside the home that may have played a role. And while all of this was shocking enough, it's what investigators didn't find that was equally unsettling. There was almost no blood in the house, meaning whoever committed the murders had spent an enormous amount of time cleaning and scrubbing the scene. But still, there were a few crucial traces of evidence that remained. There were faint traces of blood found on the bathroom floor, the kitchen floor, and the wooden stairs leading up to Charles's bedroom. A final trace of blood was discovered on the keyhole of Charles's bedroom door. There were no signs of forced entry to the home, and it was noted that all the doors and windows were locked from the inside and the blinds were drawn, which meant that whoever killed this elderly couple had full access to every part of the house. Upstairs in Charles's bedroom, officers found more questions than answers. Charles left behind his commercial pilot's license, an honorable discharge from the Navy, musical instruments, and a Texas A&M Cadet Corps hat. But there was no sign of Charles himself. Neighbors said they couldn't recall exactly when the last time they saw Fred and Edwina alive was, but they were sure it hadn't been during the week they were discovered dead.
It didn't take long for the police to zero in on their prime suspect, and that was the Rogers' son, Charles, of course. The elaborate staging of the crime, the precise anatomical knowledge, and his sudden disappearance made him the most likely perpetrator in the eyes of the investigators. A nationwide search was launched to find him. Since Charles was a licensed pilot, one of their first moves was to check airports just in case he tried to flee by air. Unfortunately, though, since Charles was a literal shut-in that nobody ever saw, the police would struggle to recognize him even if they were standing right next to him because no one knew what he looked like, and of course there's no photos of him to go off of either. Theories as to where Charles may have gone started circulating right away, with some suggesting he may have escaped to Canada, while others were convinced that he was just hiding off-grid in a dense, swampy region of East Texas called the Big Thicket. Charles was actually known to vanish for weeks at a time without a trace, so he could literally be anywhere. Speculation was high since there were no real or solid leads. Lead investigator Jim Binford said that the theories really ran the gamut from satanic possession to evil government agencies. The rumors truly did run wild. In 1997, more than 30 years after the murders, a Houston couple named Hugh and Martha Gardenier took it upon themselves to reinvestigate the case. I thought this was so interesting because of, the level of time and, dedication these people took to look into this 30 years later. It kind of makes me feel like they were just a really cool married couple that were like, we just need a hobby. Let's just find something to do and look into this really old cold case. But it's crazy because they ended up uncovering a lot of information.
Yeah.
So they conducted interviews with over 100 people and combed through old police reports and ultimately self-published an ebook titled The Icebox Murders. Their conclusion was that the simplest explanation was probably the correct one, that Charles Rogers had killed his parents. According to the Gardeniers, though, it went beyond just a random act of madness. They believed Charles had endured a lifetime of emotional and physical abuse at the hands of his parents, Fred and Edwina. Furthermore, Charles had reportedly been financially exploited by his parents for years. Though Charles technically owned the family home, his parents had allegedly forged his signature on property deeds and taken out loans in his name, putting him in a financial stranglehold. When the Gardeniers spoke to surviving family members, they uncovered even more disturbing claims. Some relatives weren't exactly shocked by the murders. In fact, they were surprised it hadn't happened sooner. Several family members allegedly told the Gardeniers that the Rogers had it coming.
Ooh. So based on their investigation, the Gardeniers believed that after committing the murders, Charles fled to Honduras, where he tapped into old oil industry connections and found work in mining. They even suggested that Charles went on to make a significant amount of money while living in Central America. But according to their findings, Charles's story didn't end up peacefully. They claim that after some of his mining projects failed to make payroll, he was ultimately killed by other miners in Honduras. They allegedly bludgeoned him to death with a pickaxe. The Gardeniers also shared their belief that the case was never thoroughly investigated. First, Fred's background as a bookie meant that he ran in gambling circles with people who didn't want their names dragged into a police investigation. Digging too deep into the Rogers family history might have exposed things that certain members of the community wanted to keep buried. Secondly, the Houston Police Department in the 1960s ran a small operation without the modern-day tools and resources available in current times. The authorities likely did receive tips about Charles's whereabouts, but the prevailing attitude within the department was that the Rogers were just bad characters and they really weren't missed anyway. Another theory suggested that Charles may have been in far more than just the brutal murder of his parents. Some conspiracy theorists think he may have played a role in one of the most infamous crimes in American history, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. This was shocking to me. This is...
Me too.
I was like, are you kidding me? How did we get here? But it's actually super fascinating, and I don't really know what I believe anymore. So in the 1992 book, The Man on the Grassy Knoll, authors John R. Craig and Philip A. Rogers alleged that Charles was one of the mysterious tramps photographed in Dealey Plaza on the day of the assassination. So if you're not sure about these so-called tramps, it's not what I thought the word tramp meant in this story. But here's a little more information. Shortly after JFK was shot on November 22nd, 1963, several Dallas area newspapers published photos of 3 scruffy-looking men being escorted by police near the Texas School Book Depository. These men became known as the 3 Tramps. They were arrested, photographed, and then quietly released without any formal charges or proper identification. No arrest records were made public for years, which only added fuel to the speculation and conspiracy theorists who began to argue that these men weren't just ordinary vagrants, they were covert operatives disguised as transients. So the theory goes that the men were positioned near the grassy knoll as backup shooters or possibly part of a CIA hit squad. The fact that they were released without any clear explanation suggested to many that a cover-up was in process. In reality, tramps was a term used at the time to describe underemployed, hard-drinking nomads who often hitchhiked on trains, but once those photos were published, the idea that these 3 men were involved in the assassination took on a life of its own.
So where does Charles Rogers really fit into any of that? You're probably wondering. Well, it turns out that he had a connection to another suspicious figure in the JFK saga, and that was a man named David Ferrie. David was an eccentric guy, and more importantly, he was a member of the Civil Air Patrol, where he reportedly crossed paths with Charles Rogers. This is interesting because David Ferrie was also Lee Harvey Oswald's flight instructor in the very same Civil Air Patrol group.
Was there 8 people alive at this time? Because
literally.
We did a story earlier in the year about the lady who had had an affair with JFK.
Mary Pinchot Meyer.
Thank you. And now we're here. And then it's just instead of 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon, it's 1 degree to JFK.
Seriously, it's actually wild how many people I have learned had a connection to JFK in some way.
Crazy, yeah.
Absolutely, completely crazy to think about. Years later, New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison would publicly identify David Ferrie as a potential conspirator in JFK's assassination. And if you connect those dots, it's not hard to see why some people think Charles might have been tangled up in this conspiracy as well. He had the skills, he was a trained pilot, he spoke 7 different languages, he had military experience, and he was known for his intelligence and his secrecy. And if the idea that Charles was connected to the JFK assassination wasn't out there enough, it actually gets even weirder than that. The authors of this book also tied Charles's story to another notorious figure, Charles Harrelson, which is the father of actor Woody Harrelson. Some people may already know this, especially true crime buffs, but Charles Harrelson was a known contract killer. He was convicted for the murder of businessman Sam DeGelia in South Texas, and though he was sentenced to serve 15 years, he managed to get out in 5 thanks to good behavior.
That's wild. 5 years for a murder?
I know.
It was hired murder.
Yeah, 70s were a different time for sure. In 1979, Harrelson's criminal career actually escalated when he was allegedly paid $250,000 by drug traffickers to assassinate U.S. District Judge John H. Wood Jr., a.k.a. Maximum John, which he was called because he had a tendency to opt for the most harsh of sentencing for drug offenders. Judge Wood was shot and killed outside of his home in Alamo Heights, and that made him the first federal judge to be murdered in the U.S. in the 20th century. During his arrest, Charles Harrelson reportedly confessed to being one of the gunmen involved in JFK's assassination. He later retracted that statement, but the claim, of course, only added to the endless conspiracy theories surrounding the case. Harrelson was ultimately convicted of Judge Woods' murder and sentenced to 2 life terms in federal prison. The weapon used in the assassination had been purchased by Harrelson's wife, Joanne, who was later convicted of conspiracy to obstruct justice and perjury, and she was eventually released on parole. Throughout the years, Woody Harrelson supported his father's legal efforts and even hired the famed attorney Alan Dershowitz for his father's appeals. But in 2004, the Supreme Court denied Harrelson's final appeal, and he died of a heart attack in 2007 at the age of 69 while he was incarcerated at Colorado's infamous Supermax federal prison. Melissa, did you know that about Woody Harrelson's father?
I did, and when I was reading about it before, I was thinking that should be a story we cover because it is so wild.
It truly is wild. And every time I see Woody Harrelson's face, like, I always remember back to that. I'm like, oh, yeah, like your dad was a very infamous person in history. Very fascinating. And we're going to get back into the rest of the story after one last break to hear a word from this week's sponsors.
Lately, my social media feeds have been full of all these viral makeup tricks, like ways to get the perfect lashes without extensions. And I love watching these videos, but honestly, I'm more of a simple mascara and gloss gal most days. I just want something that actually works, and that's why I'm obsessed with Thrive Causemetics.
Me too. Their products are so good, and they're 100% vegan and cruelty-free, which is something I really appreciate. Thrive Causemetics makes clean, high-performance products that you can feel good about wearing, whether you're going for your everyday look or something a little more fun. And one thing I love is that with every product you purchase, Thrive Causemetics actually gives back. They've donated over $150 million in products and funds to help communities thrive. They support people affected by cancer, homelessness, and domestic abuse.
And speaking of our favorites, we both love their Liquid Lash Extensions Mascara. It makes your lashes look so long and defined, and it doesn't clump or flake. Plus, it slides right off with warm water, so you're not yanking your lashes out when you take it off.
And if you're looking for something to pair with the mascara, I highly recommend the Brilliant Eye Brightener. It's an easy-to-use stick that you just swipe in the inner corner of your eyes. It makes you look instantly more awake, and it's perfect for those mornings when you haven't had quite enough sleep, which for us moms is most mornings.
Try your new trusty favorites with an exclusive set for our listeners. New customers can get the Liquid Lash Extensions Mascara and a mini-sized Brilliant Eye Brightener at a special set price with free shipping at thrivecausemetics.com/moms. That's Thrive Causemetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/moms. You know, there's just something about having an outdoor space that really feels like your own little escape. And with summer here, all I've been doing is making my yard a cozy spot to actually enjoy. And Wayfair makes it so easy to find exactly what I need to create that backyard vibe I'm going for.
I've been searching for an inviting but stylish seating option, and I found exactly what I was looking for on Wayfair. I was amazed at how many options they actually had, and of course ended up spending way too much time just browsing. But I finally chose a table and some big comfy chairs that are perfect for gathering with friends or family. I even grabbed some outdoor string lights while I was at it, and now the whole space feels like a cozy, elevated outdoor lounge.
And now is definitely the time to grab those bigger outdoor items like patio sets, lounge chairs, fire pits, and even gazebos. Wayfair has it all, and what really surprised me the most was how affordable it all was. Even shipping on the big stuff is free, so you don't have to deal with the crazy delivery fees on top of your purchase. I love that it's truly a place to buy everything from seating, dining sets, and fun decor like planters and outdoor rugs. It's nice knowing that no matter your style or your budget, you really can make your space your own.
Don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home.
And now back to the episode. So before the break, we were discussing Charles Rogers and the connections he may have had to the JFK assassination, of all things that I didn't expect to happen in this story. But according to John Craig and Philip Rogers, the authors of The Man on the Grassy Knoll, they believe Charles Rogers had documented his own involvement in JFK's assassination in his personal diaries, and that the discovery of these diaries is what ultimately led to the murder of his parents.
Honestly, I'm bought in. I'm bought into this whole theory.
I mean, by like the third line, I was like, yeah, no, he did it. He's one of the tramps.
Yes.
So the theory was that Charles, an intelligent, reclusive man and an alleged CIA asset, had been recruited by the agency in 1956. They claim he was in Dallas on the day of the assassination and then disappeared for 5 months afterward, only to reappear acting in a peculiar way. When he resurfaced, his mom became suspicious and started tracking his phone calls and questioning his activities and possibly discovered his diary. It's theorized that Charles then murdered both of his parents in an effort to protect the skeletons in his closet. It's also alleged that Charles used his advanced technical skills and ham radio equipment to communicate with other agents, and after the murders, he flew to Guatemala where, according to them, he may have lived for years afterward. Some law enforcement who have been interviewed over the years admitted that the theory is plausible, which is all it takes for Mandy and I to completely grab onto it, but they also point out that there's no solid evidence or official confirmation of it. The authors of the book also allege that Charles may have also been the man who impersonated Lee Harvey Oswald in Mexico City. So, weeks before JFK was assassinated, someone claiming to be Lee Harvey Oswald was spotted in Mexico City visiting both the Cuban and Soviet embassies. The story goes that this man was attempting to arrange a trip abroad. But the man who appeared on the surveillance footage didn't look or sound like Oswald much at all. Even the CIA admitted in private that the person in those tapes may have been an imposter.
Why does the CIA only admit things in private?
Oh, it's very hush-hush. I mean, I feel like that's a whole part of their thing.
For sure.
But, like, it is funny where it's like 50 years later. They're like,
yeah,
maybe. It could be. So this detail has fueled speculation for decades, and according to these books' authors, it may have been Charles Rogers. And Charles Rogers actually would have been ideal for covert intelligence work, considering his extensive knowledge in science, cryptography, and radio communications. He was fluent in Spanish and had military experience. If this impersonation theory was true, which according to Mandy and I, absolutely, Charles would have been recruited or potentially volunteered himself to impersonate Oswald in order to muddy the waters and then confuse the intelligence community in regard to Oswald's movements in the weeks leading up to the assassination. Of course, these theories and assertions are based on circumstantial connections and not proven with real evidence, except signed by Melissa and Mandy.
Exactly. In the years after the Icebox murders, Charles Rogers remained a ghost. Despite a nationwide manhunt and countless theories about his whereabouts and his fate, not a single confirmed sighting of Charles was ever verified, which I also think is wild whenever we hear stories where someone just disappears.
Absolutely. Although it's still confusing because nobody seemed to know what he looked like.
That's true. That's true. So yeah, that's fair. Nobody does know.
We could have seen him.
Exactly. He could be your neighbor. After nearly a decade of silence, the state had a local judge declare Charles Rogers legally dead in absentia, though to this day, he remains the only official suspect in the murder of his parents. The question of what truly happened to Charles has never been answered. Did he flee to Honduras and meet a violent end? Was he a CIA operative who disappeared into the shadows? Or
ding, ding, ding.
Did he die alone, never to be found by anyone? Truth is, we just may never know. As for the house at 1815 Driscoll Street, where the horrific double homicide took place, it sat abandoned for years after the crime because nobody wanted to live there, of course, and
Weird.
The neighbors considered the house a nuisance, and it was just a dark reminder of what had taken place inside. Finally, in 1972, the house was torn down and the lot was left vacant for a very long time. It wasn't until the summer of 2000 that the space was finally redeveloped, and today, condominiums stand where the Rogers family home once sat. But longtime residents of the area still remember what happened there. According to the True Crime Chronicles podcast, the original crime scene photos from the Rogers house became infamous in the Houston Police Department. This is fascinating. So at one point, 50 large 8x10 prints were made for training purposes and circulated among the recruits at the police academy. And over the years, so many copies of these crime scene photos were made that the negatives eventually wore out. So they couldn't even make more, and they weren't able to recover all the photos after the fact
this
that the
is such
negatives ran out. Like, you didn't just make a hard copy to keep for the police department.
Do not touch.
Right.
Yes.
Like, this is our copy, forever. Like, this is ours. They just didn't do that, I guess. Maybe they weren't thinking that you could wear the negatives out like that. So to this day, though, some of those chilling images could still be floating around in private collections or just tucked inside of boxes that have been long forgotten. Or, like you said, they could just be in a family member's closet. Like, who knows?
Yeah. What if on Antique Roadshow it came back out and somebody was like, I found this really cool chest, and they open it and they're like, these are the original photos from the FBI.
Icebox Murders.
That would be amazing. Like, can you imagine?
Oh, my God.
Somebody's got them somewhere.
It would be amazing. And no, I couldn't imagine, because what I imagine is that the FBI isn't going to pay you for them. So
they will if they want them back from me. I would do a Goog before I went on to Antique Roadshow and be like, dear ChatGPT, what in here could be worth money and what is possibly illegal? And then I would do what I needed to do.
There you go. I'm so glad we have that kind of faith in ChatGPT now.
Yeah, we're like, we don't want the FBI to not pay us, so we'll tell ChatGPT, who I'm sure my FBI agent's looking at my thing FBI. All the time. Right. We should actually call the ChatGPT FBI girl, because that's probably what it is. But yeah, this story is crazy, and I did not know about it, and I really want to read both of the books. The book that the Gardeniers wrote and the Man on the Grassy Knoll. I've never read that, but I really want to. Yeah,
well, it's what I love about conspiracy theory things is that there's always such a rabbit hole you can go down. And even though I know quite a bit about the JFK, the different conspiracy theories about the JFK assassination, I feel like even just some of the information, that we discussed in this episode from that book were things I had never heard of. Right. And so it's always interesting to just go and find out more information about something that you already know. And it's crazy. But like I said, it feels like everybody knew JFK back then. Everyone was connected to him. Everyone could have had some role in his assassination. It's truly wild. So yeah,
I feel like if you were alive during that year, suspect immediately. Just everyone. Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe they would actually figure it out then. I mean,
maybe.
Allegedly.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We will have more for you. Wait, what am I saying? We'll be back next week.
That sounds good.
Same
that sounds
time,
better.
Same place, new story.
Have a great week.
Bye.